Whether you're conquering professional exams or personal milestones, we welcome you to Beyond Clean's Confidence Certification, the 52-week test prep podcast series. With expert insights, actionable tips, and engaging discussions, we'll break down the toughest concepts in sterile processing and build your confidence every step of the way. Join host Sarah B. Cruz as she embarks on a mission to help you not just prep for tests, but craft your success story. And now your host, Sarah B. Cruz.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to Confidence Certification, a 52-week test prep podcast series to equip you to take your sterile processing career to the next level. I'm your host, Sarah B. Cruz, and on this episode, we have something very special in store. Now, last week, we've been talking a lot about what comprehension is and what does it mean to understand what we are doing or what we are learning as we study for our certification test. So it's more than just understanding how to be a sterile processing professional. It's really about why we are sterile processing professionals, want to be in the sterile processing industry, and why that matters to us. And that's such a big concept as we move forward with our certification test, because essentially the patients are never going to meet us. And honestly, unless you're running instruments to an OR room, you'll probably never even see the patient that your instruments are touching. And keep in mind, we impact more patients than doctors, dare I say. Doctors can only be in so many rooms at a single time, whereas my total knee set could be in OR 1, while my hand set is in OR 4, while my laminectomy set is in OR 3. So we could literally be in every single OR or operating room suite, while doctors can't. So as we start to really figure out why it's important to us, let's understand why we can utilize coaching. And who better to talk about this than our special guest, Rick Schultz. Hey, Rick, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I know you've been trying to get me on here, and whatever I can do to help you, I'm glad to do it. And we'll do another one about instrument inspection.
Oh, yeah. So in case you guys don't know, Rick is the instrument whisperer. So if you ever have a pair of scissors or a lock box that just doesn't want to lock, make sure you pull Rick into it. He'll talk some sense into it. Yeah. But Rick is a long time standing beacon in our professional industry. He's given himself a lot to the different associations and organizations in our space, and he is committed to making sure that sterile processing professionals really understand why sterile processing is important through their own actions. So before we get into just why you're so great, Rick, why don't you tell us how long you've been in sterile processing?
Well, it's got to go. It's way back. I'm old. I got to think 35, maybe 40 years that I started Spectrum Surgical as a one-person company and then grew it across the country. And then prior to that, I only worked in healthcare. And in fact, in high school, I used to clean the operating rooms. I was an orderly, and I used to put the little laceration sets together for the ER. So I have limited employment. It's got to involve instruments because that's all I really know. And with the surgical instrument company that I owned, the main thing, I required my employees to know products, because if we're going to go meet with customers, you got to know what you're talking about. Majority of reps out there do not know. I knew it was a working formula when I'd hear from customers who would say, boy, your sales rep, Mike, he has helped us. He knows his business. And that's what a rep is supposed to do. You know, share the knowledge, and we're the experts and help the customer.
And it seems like you've carried that same energy into a lot of what you provide our frontline professionals as well, so making sure that we understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about the coaching that maybe you used for your sales rep, or that whole coaching energy behind building comprehension for our frontline professionals. When I say comprehension, what does that mean to Rick?
Well, comprehension is the ability to spit it back out. You understand it. You may have a few different words to use, but you understand the concept, and, you are very close to having it perfect. But I never was a perfectionist. If they got it, I can tell when they have it. And one of the things it was mandatory every week. The entire sales force had to take a test. And at the beginning, I would write the test. And then I said, enough of that. Each week, I would pick a sales rep or a service rep and say, you got to put a 15-question test together. And that was going to be issued to everybody. And it was not a pass-fail. Not one single person had an issue or a concern that they were going to fail. The biggest thing is when they got an answer wrong, that was an opportunity to teach. And the whole idea behind that program was, let me find out what you don't know. You just can't ask, hey, tell me what you don't know. Nobody knows that. You have to give them some sort of baseline test. And every now and then I would have, one of the sales reps or service rep draw up a very, very complex test. And, I would see it, read it, and I would reject it. And I'd call them and just say, you're trying to make people look bad. I said, that's not the idea of this program. Those questions will not come up in the field. So taking tests is the only way to find out what you don't know. And we did that for years, and nobody got a gold star from me on that. It was just, hey, what was alarming when the same question got missed by 15, 20 people. That really told me we have a void in knowledge. So in sterile processing, there's so much to know, and our listeners don't get bogged down in, the really fine details. It's important to know a complete understanding of all the basics and then just work your way up from there.
And I think you highlighted a point too, where there's the opportunity to teach. I know as a sterile processing instructor, when I start to see a lot of my students get the same question incorrect, right or wrong, that's not the point. We're looking for the opportunity to teach, but it also gives me the opportunity to instruct differently, right? Take a different look at how they might learn, how they might process the information. Maybe I didn't spend as much time on it as I should have, or what the group needed. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to take the ability to learn when we are wrong and how to really investigate that, and then mix that together with how we need to learn it. What do you think?
Yeah, that's sometimes as educators, we gloss over details that they miss. It reminds us to slow down and re-explain it. And it's kind of like in a relationship. You may tell your spouse or your kids something, but you left out a lot of the details. So the teacher has to know its audience. So many times I have been at a trade conference, sterile processing, a surgery meeting, and the speaker thinks he's getting paid for using expensive words. Meaning it's ridiculous. You got to keep your lecture simple. That is so vital. And, a couple of the educators, I will never mention their names. I really like them. I really like their material. But afterwards, I told them, it was hit their ego a little bit, but I'd look them in the eye and say, you're using too big of words. You don't use a $25 word when a 5-cent word does the same thing. It's like, I like the term blood and guts versus bioburden. Bioburden sounds like science. Everybody knows what blood and guts are. And, for the teachers, you keep it simple. You don't have to impress your students. You already got the job.
Right. And, I think that also goes to the people that are trying to self-study because, a lot of the people listening to our podcast are seeking this self-study journey where they're trying to coach themselves and study the way that they need to. Many of them aren't in a formal sterile processing program. So if they were to create a robust understanding of a subject, like the way that you said teachers glaze over things, what are some key points that someone on a self-study journey can use to tell if they understand a concept and can move on from it?
Yeah. Well, the thing that comes to mind is if you're in a classroom setting, sit in the front row and ask questions. The minute you don't understand anything, you're in the front row. They're not looking at your face. They're looking at the back of your head. So ask away. And I just was on a conference call before this. Some very, very high level MDs, PhDs were all working on this problem. And I was finally called in 2 days ago to help them. And I don't sit on my hands. I jumped right in because I don't see their problem like they're seeing it. For the students that are studying, don't sit on your hands. Ask what you don't understand. And if you don't understand, ask it again. Because the worst thing is to be sitting there saying, I still don't get this. I don't get this. There's been many times in my CEO career where I've been in continuing ed courses and these people fly in from the West Coast to educate us and their ego is bigger than the room and I just don't hold back. I'm not known for, and just say that concept may work in California, but it doesn't work here in Ohio. Or, I've had a few knockdown, drag out discussions with educators because they're not getting the job done. And it's that keeping the subject matter simple is a very good teacher. That's what the students need. And also know the education level of your students. I remember being involved at a university hospital. They decided they needed all new training for the sterile processing techs, the anesthesia techs, and some of the OR techs. They got this idea, let's put them all in the room and we could rotate them through different positions.
Oh, what could possibly go wrong there?
Yeah. Yes. Well, that's so true. Then they found out that a majority of them on average only had an 8th grade education. It wasn't alarming to me. I said, we just got to teach more simpler pictures, diagrams. And the program went for about a year and then it kind of hit an iceberg, went back to their old way.
So it sounds like a lot of the actionable steps that you're suggesting include getting involved, maybe putting yourself front and center, not just in the classroom, but in your own self-study journey. And when you said ask the question over and over again, that made me think a lot of my my own journey. Sometimes when we don't hear it right the first time or we don't get it by the second time, we think it's a us problem, right? So I know me personally, when I don't have it by the third time, I'm just like, okay, just smile and nod, right? So, and that wasn't serving me at all, so I think that piece of advice with making sure that if you don't understand a concept, to ask somebody, ask them to repeat it, reread the section, maybe look into different areas that might have more information about what you just read. I think that's the best piece of advice for building a robust understanding of a subject.
I agree, but don't sit on your hands. Ask. It's so important.
All right, everybody. So don't sit on your hands, but we are going to take a little break and hear a word from our sponsor and do our mid-episode confidence boost. We'll be right back. It's time for our mid-episode confidence boost, where we focus on a key sterile processing test concept. Now, there's no guarantee these concepts will be on the test that you take, but they are key concepts to the workplace and are discussed in the literature. Today, we'll cover the structure of an instrument. Every instrument is unique in its purpose and use. This is often reflected in their design. The 5 basic structures in the anatomy of an instrument include the jaws. This is the part that comes in contact with the patient. Your box lock. This is also the weakest part of the instrument while being the most difficult to clean. Then you have your shanks. I often call them legs. They provide the closing force. Ratchet holds the instrument closed, and this can also be very difficult to clean. And lastly, you have your finger rings, used to grasp the instrument and control the action of the jaw. They can be opened or closed, round or oval. Remember, not all instruments have these components. However, they have parts that mirror the actions or purpose of the 5 areas we just listed. The composition, or what product the instrument is made of, is separated into 3 surgical instrument grades. So you have your surgical grade, which is the highest grade of quality steel. These are reusable, and they're base steel from the US and Germany. They are considered the best surgical instrument. Then you have your floor grade. They're made of a lower grade steel or quality, often referred to as Pakistani. Usually they have a mirror or shiny finish, and they can rust quickly. These are not suitable for use on OR sets and can sometimes be considered single use. Lastly, you have disposable. These are truly single-use instrumentation. They cannot be reprocessed. That's going to wrap this week's mid-session confidence boost. Good luck. Hey everybody, and welcome back. If you were sitting on your hands, please stop, because our special guest, Rick Schultz, is telling us to get active in our sterile processing test prep journey. That's right, folks. No more just sitting and waiting and hoping that we understand, but putting ourselves front and center to build a robust comprehension and understand why we're taking our test and why it's important. And more importantly, why we're learning the concepts and how they apply to our future jobs, right? Because we're all going to be sterile processing professionals, and I can't wait to see you out there in the industry. But in the meantime, I was wondering, Rick, if you could give us some insight on what you think certification provides a frontline professional, or how it contributes to the view of our industry.
Well, quite a while ago, I remember a sterile processing manager telling me that I should certify my repair techs, my repair technicians. I had about 125, 130 repair technicians across the country. And I remember we were either in Reno or Las Vegas. I know that because we were sitting on chairs at slot machines having this conversation. And he told me, he goes, Rick, you really should do that. And he goes, remember the old days when like Mr. Goodwrench those repair guys, when you get your car fixed, on their sleeves had 5 or 6 patches sewn on. And that gave the customer confidence that they know air conditioning, they know alignment, they know, I don't know, whatever other things, but it really resonated with me. And that is why getting certified in sterile processing is such a good idea. I am the first one in line to tell these hospitals to start paying more. And that pay should be based on, when you look at all the certifications out there, those should be, there should be a good pay range, but then each level of certification you should get a bump in pay.
Preach.
And the other thing where sterile processing kind of lets things down, when you go into the department, if there's like a lobby or an area not inside sterile processing, but hang on the walls all the certifications that everybody has. It's time to brag, and I think showing that your employees care, and you got their picture up there, and Deborah has 5 certifications and Sonia has 3, and here's our newest CRCST, and just celebrate that they did something extra, but put their pictures and their certifications up. It's good for the visitors in the hospitals that come in there. It's good when someone from the OR comes down and at times they think they know everything, and they look at that wall going, wow, everybody here has done their homework. So it's a real benefit to have certification, and the industry will catch up to paying you proportionately. But part of that pay should be based on the pieces of paper you get.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot with that movement, again, in my own opinion, I don't represent anybody else or anything like that. But if you like what I'm saying, come along with me. But I think a lot that sits with that is we also raise the credibility and recognition of our industry by gaining additional certifications, not just our initial CRCST or CSPDT certification, but again, all these extra credentials and really demonstrating subject matter expertise. It's like the rising tide raises all ships. And I feel like the rising tide is the certification, and the ships are the individuals in our industry, our professionals, those that impact patient safety.
Yeah, Sarah, one other thing that really, to try getting this happening at your hospital, the name tags. On the name tag should be your certifications. Because, you walk into a room, right away they're looking at who this person is. You go up to the OR, all the nurses have their degrees after them, but sterile processing doesn't. I would start a movement that your hospital should put CRCST, CIS, and what other ones. So when you go into a meeting, you got this badge of honor.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, I'm not shy to put them in my signature on my emails, or especially on my LinkedIn profile. I think that LinkedIn thinks that's my whole last name is all those letters. You know what I mean? But I agree with that sentiment as well. So let's not overwhelm our listeners, right? If you're getting an additional certification, kudos, keep doing your thing. I just recently started to get additional certifications after all my years in the industry. So as you work on that first one, that big crescendo, that big hill, Rick, what do you think are some opportunities that our listeners can take advantage of to demonstrate or gain more comprehension of what they're studying? What do you think they need to do, aside from being in the front of the classroom or advocating for themselves and asking questions? What's something that they could do by themselves?
Well, when they're working, see what they're learning, how it applies. There's one thing about a job. A lot of times at a job, you learn what you like about a job, but you also learn what you don't like. We have listeners out there working at it and studying for certification, and they're saying, my gosh, this hospital is soaking instruments in gasoline. And no, that's just a joke. But the point is, you're going to see issues, and then you'll know from tying that to your studying the benefit. You know right from wrong.
Oh, and isn't that that's such a curse and a blessing, right? Knowing right from wrong, because there's something wonderful about being completely oblivious, right? And then once you know something, you can never unknow it. I always apologize to my students when I teach them something of real substance, inside of the course. And I'm like, okay, you guys, now that you know this, I'm sorry, you're never going to be able to unknow this. So what are you going to do with that information?
Yeah. Yeah. It just, as I mentioned earlier, I was on a call right a minute before this recording, and I really just wanted to tell them they're making a mountain out of a molehill. They need to get out of their universe and go to other hospitals and look, see, touch, and see it's the same. And I just, when learning and getting certification, it gives you confidence.
Yes. Confidence certification. Perfect. I agree. And I think that's also great advice for our individuals, our professionals, our future sterile processing team to take into consideration, not making a mountain out of a molehill. Yes, the mountain is the entire book, right? But you can break it down. You can make it a molehill. Maybe a bunch of molehills will help you climb that mountain. No? Okay. I think that's something that can really be beneficial. Just take it by bite size. And I think that's where comprehension really sits the most, is when we take something from a grand scheme and make it small and really take the time to digest it. That's where robust learning and comprehension sit, is in that moment of small, deep focus.
And one other thing, you may learn it, you may comprehend it, and you may know it, but you may work at a place where they don't put it to play. And the one thing is, that's where you learn about being patient. And, you got to speak up if you truly believe it's patients' safety's at risk. I never knew that till we came up with a tagline for my whole company. We make patients safer. Everything, we sharpen a scissor that benefits the patient. The sales reps have a test that makes the patient safer. And keeping that in mind, I've had this happen to me and I always laugh about it. I had a kidney stone that had to be removed surgically. As I tell everybody, when I do one, I do it big. And this one, they had to do percutaneous, meaning go in through the kidney to get it. My number one sales rep, I wasn't in any pain. He goes, hey, listen, let me go down there and have so-and-so and so-and-so put together your instrument sets so they're perfect. And I looked at him. I said, that's not necessary. I know that they generally do things right and everything's going to be fine. But remember, all of us old people, when did they tell you to have your scoping? What's the old thing everybody says? Oh, make sure you're the first patient of the day. It's the cleanest scope. That is terrible. It is terrible because all the scopes should be the same. And, going down and saying, hey, listen, let's get these trays ready for Rick Schultz. No, that's not how we do things.
Right. That makes me think of the time that I had surgery done and they asked me if I wanted to pick my own surgical case. And I was like, first of all, you all know Jerry picks the best. Okay. So Jerry's going to pick my case. but no, it's really all about that integrity in that space, right? Where it's, if we're all studying and we're testing and we're carrying out our practices in a consistent way, that confidence should be there in our practices and not just in our certification endeavors.
Yeah, so true.
So since we were both under surgery and we've been hanging out in this industry, definitely you longer than me, I got to ask, what is your favorite surgical instrument? You can only pick one.
Well, many people may not know it, but it's a round shank iris. Most irises have flat shanks, but there was a scissor maker in Germany that made the finest scissors, and people would see it and I would just show it to them. I said, this scissor is sexy. There's just something about it. All their scissors, they would use round shanks. And I've always fallen in love with that style, and, hospitals rarely would order them. This was small manufacture, but it was just a piece of art.
Definitely. My favorite instrument is the Gelpy. Definitely not as dainty as the iris scissor. It's kind of big and bulky, but there's just something about a self-retaining retractor that really just personifies a lot of my life. Just hold steady and do the work, right? So
Yeah. And it takes a lot for that to fail, meaning a lot of pressure for that to unratchet.
Agreed. So as we start to wrap this episode, I do want to thank you for joining us, but I tend to be a little bit of a bad guy, and I usually ask our listeners to do some homework. I give them a little assignment. I was wondering if you would do us the honor as to giving our listeners a little homework assignment or a thought-provoking question that can help them study or really bring them back to what matters. What do you want to assign to our listeners for next week?
Two things. And it involves almost every surgical tray. What are the 5 most common scissors?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yep. And then the other one, memorize the hemostat group. And I'm not taking words like baby. There is a name for the small hemostat. People say, oh, that's a baby mosquito. No, there's a name for it. But I'd like to rattle them off, but I'm not going to. But just for starters, there is a name for the 3.5 inch, the 5 inch, the 5.5 inch, the 6 1/4, and the 7 inch. They're in every tray.
We'll have to make sure we put the answers in the show notes. And, that is actually really great homework assignment, because as you prepare for the test, they do ask you about instruments on the test. They won't ask you specifically like what type of instrument is this, but they may use the name Mayo scissor in the question. And if you don't know what a Mayo scissor is, you may not be able to answer it, right?
Yeah. And specifically, I'll just share this with the audience. There's a Mayo beveled blade and a Mayo round blade. Those are distinctly different. So know your basics.
Yeah, definitely. And know your basics for your initial test, and then don't hesitate to take that CIS and use a lot of the resources that Rick provides. So again, thank you, Rick, so much for joining us. And be sure to come back next week, everybody, because as we continue this trend with understanding and comprehending what we're studying, we will be talking about learning why instead of just relying on our memory. Thanks again, Rick. All right, everybody. See you next week.
Take care, everybody.
And that's going to do it for this week's episode. For more sterile processing education and resources, make sure to visit beyondclean.net or follow Beyond Clean on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget to check out over 1,000 SPD-related videos at youtube.com/beyondclean. If you have any questions or comments for the show, you can reach out to info@beyondclean.net. Finally, make sure to download the Beyond Clean mobile app on the Apple and Android app stores so that you don't miss a future episode of any of the other awesome Beyond Clean podcasts. My name's Sarah B. Cruz, and you've been listening to Confidence Certification. Until next time, keep fighting dirty and pass that test with confidence.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast series are of Sarah B. Cruz only and do not represent the companies she works for or collaborates with.